Good morning, everybody. On this slightly bleak morning, we have the excitement of Sandra Levi talking to us this morning. Levi talking to us this morning, which will be very interesting. And she's also going to mention her new project initiative, which is coming out. Sandra started life in Manchester and came to London via Yorkshire, having spent many years in the north. She has a very varied career as an artist, a writer, a counsellor, and she worked for the British Israel Mission.
Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce.
With Henry Noble. Yeah, Commerce. With Henry Noble. Many of us remember and knew Henry Noble. And she, as an artist, she's had an exhibition at the Jewish Museum, and she's been in London for 20 years. So she's had an interesting career here too. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Sandra, who will tell us about her story and her new initiative. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Gillian. Hi, as you've heard, my name is Sandra Levi, and I can already imagine one or two of you thinking, who? I have to confess that I fear I'm sitting here under false pretenses, because in my mind, I'm just an ordinary member of the community. Well, I assure you I'm not being disingenuous, because I've listened back to some of your previous speakers, and I'm somewhat overwhelmed by the caliber of them, their life stories, and their achievements. Also, I must tell you at the outset that I do have an ulterior motive, and one which Gillian has alluded to in speaking to you today, and one for which I'd like to enlist your help, but I will flesh that out later in my talk. Many of your previous speakers touched upon their childhood experiences, memories, their parents, siblings, and the people of renown who littered their pasts, which got me thinking that I could do a bit of that too. In fact, I do come from quite interesting stock, which includes noted historians, lawyers, rabbis, writers, and scholars. My great-great-grandfather wrote a book on the Zohar, which is still in the library of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And I count the former Chief Rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, as one of my extended family, mishpocha, but on the other side, and I was so upset to hear of his death yesterday, as I'm sure many of you were. My father was one of the founding members of Reformed Judaism in Manchester, and he brought an eclectic mix of well-known people to our home. As a child, and not knowing any difference, I thought everyone entertained judges, newspaper editors, atomic scientists, and cardinals for dinner. I had two brothers, now only one, and we were quite a naughty bunch and only allowed to stay up if we behaved ourselves. Lord Justice Sir Seymour Karminski came for supper, and my father, who was a stickler for protocol, drilled us beforehand on the correct way to address him. At the age of 4, that was some moniker to get my head around, so I decided not to talk to him at all in case I got it wrong. I even refused to answer the one polite question he asked me, which was to ask my name. So, under the malevolent glare of my parents, my lips remained firmly clamped together all evening, only my eyes betraying that I'd actually heard him. At the risk of sounding like a page from the who's who of that era, other notable guests included Brian Flowers, who later became Lord Flowers. He had succeeded Klaus Fuchs, the atomic spy at Harwell. He advised the British government on computerization and once told me that the Russians had massive deployments of troops on the Chinese border. I guarded this secret that I thought only he and I knew, but by the time I decided to share it with my best friend several weeks later, she was totally unimpressed and just wanted to talk about us joining the local street gang, led by my elder brother and her elder brother too. Her father was Rabbi Bernard Casper, who subsequently became the chief rabbi of South Africa. If only he'd known what his children got up to behind his back. The Caspers lived 4 doors away, and Rabbi Casper thoroughly disapproved of my father and his brand of Judaism. So although his offspring and my brothers and I were best friends, our friendship was clandestine, and we never told on them when we all played football or cricket on a Shabbat afternoon. Apparently, he told his children not to be friendly with us because he said he could smell the bacon frying in our kitchen. If my mother had heard that, she would have boxed his ears because she kept a strictly kosher kitchen. My father held the first ever ecumenical service at his shul, together with the late Cardinal Heenan, when he was Archbishop of Liverpool and later Westminster. It was a momentous occasion for the Jews of Manchester. And beforehand, the Cardinal duly came for dinner to iron out the details, accompanied by 2 of his fellow clergymen. This time, my brothers and I were only permitted to hand round the drinks and canapes before dinner and then make ourselves scarce. We had a Catholic maid at the time, and she almost keeled over with joy when she caught sight of the Cardinal, resplendent in his long black and red frock coat, with his two colleagues similarly attired. I think she thought he was the Pope, and when she put his plate of chicken soup down in front of him, she grabbed hold of his hand, kissing his ring fervently. My mother froze and almost had to prise her off him. Another notable visitor was Rabbi Dr. Leo Beck, the theologian who was born in 1873 and later interned in Theresienstadt. He was the leader of German Jewry during the Nazi period, and he slept in my bed. I hasten to add, without me in it. I was about 12 at the time and had never heard of him before, so I rather resented having to vacate my room for this quiet, aesthetic-looking elderly gentleman. The German government had minted a stamp with his face on it in his honor. This ultimately became a treasured possession. And when my late husband Brian and I went to Berlin a few years ago, our guide told us that there was even a street and square named after him. Like I said before, I do not think my brothers and I thought there was anything unusual about the people who came across our doorstep. They were simply part of the fabric of our life over the years. Sammy Davis Jr, the American entertainer, also came when he was performing in Manchester. He described himself as a one-eyed Jewish Negro, his words, and he autographed a 10-shilling note for me, which was a lot of money for a teenager in those days. I'm ashamed to say I spent it when I was a bit short of pocket money a while later. The evening after he came to our house, he apparently said from the stage of the Opera House Theatre that yesterday he met a rabbi who looked like Groucho Marx and got laughs as well. My father chaired many committees in Manchester and was prominent in the Council of Christians and Jews. He also had the God spot on Granada television. That is, whenever Bill Grundy, the anchorman of the Look North programme, needed someone to give thoughts on some religious or ethical issue of the day, the television cameras panned to my father. I, his teenage daughter, found it excruciatingly embarrassing when elderly ladies accosted me in the street wanting to praise him. This was not a one-off occurrence. It happened regularly. To me, he was just my dad, and I wished he would be more like everybody else's dad. I imagine the children of many prominent people feel that way too. I equally imagine that some prominent people have also been embarrassed by their children over the years. My elder brother used to have a ruse when he was at Manchester Grammar School that if he didn't want to do a particular sport, he insisted to his teachers that it was against his religion. And unbelievably, he got away with it for a while. When I tried the same excuse to get me out of lacrosse, a game played by hurling a hard, lethal ball from a hockey-type stick with a net on the end of it, the gym mistress was having none of it, and she punished me by putting me in goal. I was quite small in comparison to the Amazonian wenches hurling the hard ball at my face and body. That was some education, I can tell you, and probably my first experience of being on the receiving end of practical anti-Semitism. All of this was part of the world I grew up in, and I could go on like a sort of Jewish gossip columnist. But I just want to tell you a little anecdote before I move on to more recent times. When I was about 3 years old, one of my rather formidable aunts, whose husband was a macher and founder member of Cricklewood Synagogue, pointed at me and said, "Oh, she'll do a good shidduch when she grows up." I didn't actually know what she meant and presumed it was some sort of job description. A year later, at a communal Seder that my father conducted each year at the Jewish hospital in Manchester, one of the patients asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. Well, I already knew the answer to that one because Auntie Rachel had told me. So I piped up, "I'm going to do a good shidduch." I couldn't understand why the whole table were laughing at me. Fast forward 17 years, and I met and married Brian, the good shidduch, whom some of you regular shul goers would have known, or at least recognized. He was an ebullient Yorkshireman who could sell snow to the Eskimos. He certainly sold himself to me by telling me that he was a mill owner. He wasn't. He just worked in one. But he convinced me and my parents that he was. We subsequently married and lived in a place called Guiseley in West Yorkshire, famous for having the largest fish and chip shop in the world. Harry Ramsden's was ultimately franchised all over the globe, even in the Far East. Over the years, we had 3 children and then moved to Leeds. Because of Brian's job as sales director for the said mill, he travelled all over the world and I often accompanied him. In fact, British Airways valued his customs so highly, plus the amount of auxiliary business he gave them, that they actually flew us and our children to several far-flung exotic destinations for free. Those truly were the days. My young kids had never been to the hotspots of St. Anne's or Bournemouth that their friends talked about, but they could certainly tell you all about what Antigua and Hong Kong had to offer. I used to feel a bit guilty about that. In those days, I was keen to have my own working life, and I first became part of a textile design team, then moved on to having my own retail business. A few years later, I was headhunted by the British Israel Chamber of Commerce to run their office in the Northeast. Brian wasn't keen on the idea, telling me that I'd get bored of it, but it turned out to be one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. My boss in London was, as you've heard, the late Henry Noble, a member of our shul, and one of the nicest men I've ever met. Added to which, he never refused me a pay rise, which was a double bonus. I had to develop the Chamber's profile in our region, and did this by taking annual and biannual government-sponsored trade missions to Israel to encourage bilateral trade. I actively discouraged Jewish firms from joining the missions because I knew they would go anyway, but instead sought out thriving non-Jewish companies to join the trade missions. I persuaded the Yorkshire Post newspaper to co-sponsor the first one, which was led by the business editor and myself. And I got Bradford University Business School to co-sponsor the second mission. Funnily enough, the Israelis were incredibly chauvinistic about the idea of a woman fronting the mission, and they kept asking me which man was really the mission leader. Our first trade mission had some very thirsty businessmen on it. I had negotiated with the hotel that we had the use of the business lounge in the Dan Hotel where we stayed, and where free food and drinks were on offer during the day and evening. Every night, the Yorkshiremen managed to drink the bar dry, literally. And I could see the pained expression on the hotel manager's face after day 2. I arranged for us to decamp to the King David Hotel in Jerusalem for the weekend, because I was particularly keen for those who had never been to Israel before to take them to Yad Vashem. I arranged a special guide to take us round, and when we all regrouped at the end, one man was missing. We waited for him till the others got restless, then got back onto the bus to take us to the hotel without him. We found him later at the hotel reception, and when I asked him where he had got to, he said, "Well, it wasn't really my cup of tea." The business editor, a committed Christian, snapped back, "Well, the Holocaust wasn't really the Jews' cup of tea either." We were very lucky that whilst we were at the King David Hotel, ex-President Gorbachev of Russia and his wife Raisa were visiting, with all the pomp of a state visit. The Russian waitresses and chambermaids, and I must admit all of us, were so excited because in their country of birth, they would never have been allowed within miles of him. That year also coincided with the Queen's official birthday celebration. And because we were a government trade mission, we were invited to the Queen's birthday party at the British ambassador's residence in Herzliya, along with other ambassadors, local dignitaries, bigwigs, etc. It could have been the Queen's Arms pub, for all my 29 participants were concerned, because as soon as we arrived, they skipped all the formalities and made a beeline for the bar, which they hogged for most of the evening, leaving Simon Mountford, the business editor, and me to do all the networking and schmoozing. Amazingly, the group did fantastic business whilst they were in Israel, and they were all completely sober every morning. Unbelievably, I bumped into the ambassador, Sir David Manning, at a bus stop outside the Royal Academy a few years later. After completing his post in Israel, he became Tony Blair's foreign policy advisor, and then British ambassador to Washington in 2003. Whilst we chatted waiting for the bus, he told me that we in Yorkshire had taken the largest trade missions to Israel of any other Chamber of Commerce, and I felt quite chuffed about that. Between 1995 and 1997, when we were taking our trade missions, we reached the target of £2 billion in bilateral trade. Not all down to me, I hasten to add. By 2017, British-Israel trade had reached 3.9 billion, but unfortunately, I don't know what the current figure is. On one of my trips to Israel, I wanted to meet Steph Wertheimer, one of the most forward-thinking industrialists of his time, who had created Israel's first business and industrial park. Excuse me one moment. My aim was to try to forge some kind of a tie-up between him and another forward-thinking Yorkshire businessman, Sir Ernest Hall, who completely redeveloped a former carpet mill in Halifax into a huge, thriving business park called Dean Clough. I secured an appointment with Steph Wertheimer and took a rather hairy taxi ride to his base in what was then called the Rose City, or Tefen. This was entirely his brainchild, an industrial city not far from Nazareth, which was designed as a combination of industry and beautiful surroundings. It was laid out with beautiful parks and artworks and was mainly staffed by robots. Yes, you heard right, robots. When I got out of the car, I was guided into his office by robots. That was a really strange experience, telling the robots who I was there to see. I suppose I could have just said, "Take me to your leader," but I resisted the temptation. Steph Wertheimer subsequently founded several more industrial parks in Israel and neighboring countries, creating jobs for Arabs as well as Israelis. I think he was one of the most inspiring and forward-thinking men I ever met. And it is a great regret to me that in spite of both men agreeing to come on board, for various reasons, mainly that we moved to London in the meantime, I could never see this project through to completion. To help fund our activities and pay my salary, we raised money for the Chamber through a series of high-profile concerts. The first took place in the Hockney Gallery in Saltaire, a redeveloped former textile mill, which was the brainchild of a young entrepreneur, Jonathan Silver. Jonathan had been at school with David Hockney, and had amassed an amazing collection of his work. Brian and I knew Jonathan well, and I persuaded him to lend us the mill for the occasion. At first he argued, saying there could be some damage to the priceless collection. But after a lot of persuasion and many promises to the contrary from me, he came on board. On the night, the gallery was decked out beautifully with amazing lilies that Jonathan had flown in specially from Holland, and the concert was to be given by the winner of the Jerusalem International Piano Competition, Benjamin Frith. The Israeli ambassador, Jacob Biran, was to be our guest of honor, and we had to hire a top-quality Steinway piano from an arts centre in nearby Rotherham. Frith would be playing on a raised dais, surrounded by the audience and the priceless art. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the ambassador arrived with a police escort, then local police with sniffer dogs after him. Imagine my sickening horror when the police informed me that the dogs had found something suspicious in the piano and that they were going to have to do a controlled explosion in the gallery. Even today, thinking about it, I feel slightly sick. I must have lost half a stone in that moment. I virtually fell to my knees, begging them not to do it. And finally, a compromise was reached with the chief constable, whereby they would fill the gallery with extra police who could spring into action at a moment's notice if anything untoward happened. It subsequently turned out, when we returned the piano to the Arts Centre, that what the dogs had reacted to in the Steinway was not explosives, but a large stash of cannabis. Incidentally, the concert was a great success. For our second fundraising concert the year after, we had the famous Black Dyke Mills Band. And luckily, no suspicious substances were found in any of their instruments. So now I've told you something of my past. I'd like to move on to the present and my reason for doing this Zoom meeting. I was widowed just over 2 years ago, and as many of you will know, the first year after a bereavement, one functions on automatic pilot. In fact, during the first 3 months afterwards, when I wasn't invited out, my automatic pilot told me that a nourishing, healthy diet should consist of family-sized packets of crisps and cups of tea. Then one gradually readjusts and life continues, but differently. People are wonderful and friendly, but like it or not, one's status has irrevocably changed. Walking into shul is much the same as before, but walking into the Kiddush is a whole different ballgame, especially if you can't spot anyone you know. All you see are happy, fretting people, and you are no longer sure you are part of them. Then lockdown came, and that was, and still is, a game changer that sort of focuses the mind on the aloneness aspect. It was at this point that I started to think about creating a nexus of people in a similar position who could meet either by Zoom or in person safely to talk about our similarities and how we can help each other by being supportive and friendly. A friend of mine with whom I discussed this idea was very keen for me to stress that this is not a group of Nebuchs or Nebuchim, which I suppose is the plural. We would be a group with one main thing in common, which is that to all intents and purposes, we are people who are alone. I do believe this group should be open to both men and women, regardless of their orientation, who know they have something they can share with others. Self-pity is not part of the remit, nor is it a covert dating agency. I envisage it would be more of a friendship support network, and the membership would set their own agenda. But we cannot create or explore this idea further without your help, which is why I'm bringing it to you today. After all, singlehood and being newly alone is probably the only growth industry there is, and will come to all of us eventually. I need your input if it is to get off the ground, and it would be such a pity if we didn't explore this idea further. I know the shul posts events on Facebook, and I could foresee this being opened up to other shuls and organizations, because each must have its fair share of people in the same position. Youngish already does sterling work in catering for families and others, but we are a slightly different group because we are partnerless. The fact that I'm talking to you today is down to Youngish, and I thank them for giving me this platform and opportunity. But I need your input and help to see if this idea has teeth. Maybe together we can create something good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. That's really fascinating, very interesting, your life especially. And I think starting the new friendship group will be a success. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts about the group?
I do. May I say, Sandra, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that presentation. Very interesting. We know so little about the people in the community and they about each other. And thank you for sharing. It's an important idea that you've mooted. Of course, it goes not only across sexual orientation and so on, but it also goes across the ages, not only old, but middle-aged, not only middle-aged, but young. I think that that's an important factor to add. Also, I'd like to know, Gillian, perhaps Lawrence, you could advise us here about how people might best connect with Sandra. Is it going to be a separate kind of connection, like friendship, which is advertised this morning in Sandra's presentation, or is it going to go through Youngish? I think this is a discussion, perhaps, which should be taken further, and the PR for this should be thought about and shared with other synagogues, as you suggest, and other institutions. So maybe Gillian, Lawrence, Sandra, and Ellie might think about the further dissemination of this idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra, I think one of your ideas was to have maybe an evening meeting of people who are interested.
Yes, and we talked vaguely about a Thursday evening because you didn't want it to clash with other events that were taking place, other Zoom events. And I presume everybody noticed that if they are interested, they should make contact with Tamara at Southampton. So this is the email address. It's tamara@southampton.org. And then if they registered that they were interested or willing to help, because I can't do this on my own. I'm very happy to try and do as much as I can for it, but I need some sort of a team. And also I think that would be more interesting because there's more ideas thrown about.
I have to say, firstly, thank you. I think it's a really lovely idea. I think there's lots of people on their own, all ages and different stages of their life for different reasons. Yeah. And also, I think it's very lovely. You know, you can have incredible friendships within different generations. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in the beginning of lockdown, I actually offered in my next door area here in St John's Wood, you know, free French and Spanish lessons just for people who are a bit lonely. And I met the most incredible 87-year-old lady who's become like a dear friend, and 16-year-old kids and 10-year-old kids. And it's actually lovely. So anyway, if you need any help organising anything, I'd be delighted to help.
Thank you so much. So if you could just send your details to the synagogue office tomorrow. I'll repeat that, tomorrow at southampton.org. Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, really, I had this idea, and it wasn't born out of total altruism. It was born out of a feeling of desperation in lockdown. What the hell do I do now? And I'm sure one or two people have felt the same thing. And so, you know, I think that it would be nice to feel there was some support network that we could rely on each other if necessary. And so absolutely. I do hope more people will come on board with it.
Can I just say, hi, Sandra. Hi. As some of you may know, I've been involved in the share team. And this was actually something that we were talking about at our last meeting, about how to help put people in touch with each other. So in terms of helping with the administration, I'm very happy to help with sort of being on board. And we've got some ideas that we actually spoke about separately. So from the share team's point of view, it's a fantastic idea. Loved your talk. And I'd be happy to be on board to help.
Thank you so much. Is share the ones who collect food?
We don't do the food part. We have a team of volunteers who help with shopping. They can help with getting people online. So we've got some people that are very good at IT. So if you know somebody that would like to be on board, in fact, I was talking to Lawrence about this earlier in the week. If you know people that would like to be on board but aren't IT literate, we might be able to get some iPads. We might be able to talk through with people how to get onto Zoom. We also, apart from doing shopping, IT, we also have been in the last lockdown and continue to do so. Our volunteers have been calling people that live on their own just for a chat, for a keep in touch chat. And one of our ideas we spoke about was actually getting people together to sort of buddy up and do this. And this, I think, will come from your idea of friendship. People will naturally do this and make new friends, which was one of our ideas. But I think you're ahead of us, you're ahead of the game, which is great. But as I say, I'm happy to be on board.
Well, thank you so much. Could I just mention that I had the thought that maybe when we have a Zoom meeting, we can have it based on a talk that somebody might want to give. And some of my thoughts were topics we could talk about, say, philosophical, special interest, music, the arts, religion, history, politics, to name but a few. Oh, and mental health in lockdown.
Sandra, we had talked about a possibility of the first meeting on Thursday, the 19th of November, around maybe 8 o'clock in the evening. We still have to clear that with the Shul office, but that was a possibility if people noted that in the diary and get in touch with Tamara. Eventually, I think they will eventually, if we have enough people that get in touch with you personally, Sandra, and let's hope you have a little bit of a committee. Youngish are very happy to help you launch it, but you're completely independent of what you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
I always
sorry. You'll have to, okay.
Sandra.
Hi, Minu, hi.
There's something wrong
There's
probably something wrong with my.
No, go.
Okay. I always thought I knew a lot about you till this morning. I'm so impressed. All taking the initiative, all on the front row. And amazing, really, really amazing. I think your idea is a very, very good idea, and it would help a hell of a lot of people. That's all. Thank you for letting us into your life. So it's such.
Thank you, Minu. Thank you. Thank you. Love to you and John.
Does anybody have any suggestions or ideas for the new group?
Sandra, I don't know, you remember Sandra and I have known each other since we were 10 years old. Do you remember at Jackson's Row, they had a friendship club?
Yeah.
It's a very good name. It kind of says it all, and it could perhaps bring things together.
Yeah.
The voice from the past.
Yeah. That's where you and I met, when we used to have to polish the silver round the ark.
10 years old, yes.
Yeah.
We have a past, don't we, Sandra?
We do.
So do I.
Yeah.
I'd just like to congratulate you, Sandra. I thought that was lovely, really lovely. I do feel I know quite a bit about you, having read some of the stuff that you've written. But also, I just wanted to say how brave you've been during lockdown. I've shared quite a bit of the lockdown with you. And I think this is an excellent idea. And I hope that you'll have a great following, because I think it's much needed. And I hope it will be rolled out amongst some of the other schools, because it's, as I say, I think it's much needed.
Thank you, Liv. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just add two things? We do have a friendship club as such in South Hampstead, and that's very flourishing. So that I think we do need to be careful branding this so that it expresses and explains what you would like it to say and be, and also that what was I going to say? Yes, I think the subtext of the comments that are made about opening it up to other schools. This is not a religious activity. This is a social activity. This is about human beings, whatever their affiliation, joining together. So there needn't be, an orthodox agenda here. It is Jewish people across the boundaries of affiliation sharing something which is about aloneness or that kind of emotion, situation, feeling, and state. Also, I just wanted to say something briefly about intellectual topics. Would it be a balance about discussing things which are about your own experiences and how one is feeling and sharing in that way? As people have said, they were grateful to hear about your story and your feelings, etc., not only the facts of what happened to you. So that I think it needs to be a balance between intellectual content and also real nitty-gritty me stuff.
Yes, I very much agree with that. I think it's really helpful if people are open about how it is to be through lockdown, living in your own, etc. And I think once one person opens up, it's quite a relief to others to do the same.
Sandra, you have to turn yours off. Hello? Turn it off, please. Hello, Sandra.
Hi, John.
You never mentioned Sanderley Avenue, where you were born.
Yeah.
Together, we were next door neighbours about 32 years ago. It was 34 years.
I think it's more like 302 years.
So I wanted to congratulate you. You've been a dear friend for a long time, and your lovely late husband was a special friend. So I think your idea is very exciting. I must congratulate you. I just wanted to say, I hope you don't mind me saying this. We have a similar idea, which we started 5 months ago, called the Abraham Debating Society. And it is intellectually stimulating. We've had over 60 speakers, and we are local guys. It's not a charity, it's not a profit making, it's for people who are locked in at 11 o'clock every morning, Tuesday and Fridays. And you're all welcome. And maybe it's a good model for Sandra's idea, because everything we do is done 5 people on a committee, and we have hundreds of people watching on every occasion. It's on Tuesdays and Fridays at 11 o'clock. And you're all welcome. It's totally free. I hope you don't mind, Sandra.
No, I knew you'd do it.
No, but it's
a wonderful organisation.
It's just your project, similar to your project, except we're twice a week. And I think it's brilliant, Sandra. I think you're brilliant.
Thank you, John.
Sandra, are you particularly interested or thinking that you should maybe do it in the evening? Because you said yourself the evenings are quite long and lonely.
I just would go if people express interest. It all depends if people express interest. You know, maybe some will, maybe some won't. So if there is enough people, I believe that we perhaps ought to discuss it. But I think evenings are better because there's a lot of lectures and talks that take place during the day. So it all depends on the response. You know, I maybe this is a strange thing to say. I'm not doing this for my own self-aggrandizement. I'm just doing it if there's a nexus of people who would gain something from it. And so that's basically my feeling. So, you know, day, evening, whatever. I'd quite like to hear people's ideas. But I think maybe evening is better.
Can I just add in that? I just wonder, I'm just putting it out there as an idea for you, Sandra, and what everybody else would say. My sister is recently bereaved, and actually she finds the weekends quite hard. One of the ideas we had as a share team was particularly in lockdown or for the future, because we don't know how this is going to pan out, is possibly some sort of activity during the day at the weekend, maybe a walking group, a couple of people, just putting people in touch who would like to go for a walk with somebody else. So I think, you know, obviously it's all your ideas, Sandra. I don't want to take away from that, but I think it's something that I've certainly listened to my sister and thought, gosh, it would be really good if she could. She does meet her friends, but she needs more. Meet people locally, just to go for a walk at the weekend when other activities shut down, or Shabbat afternoon or Sunday afternoon. I can see some people nodding. So it's just an idea. And obviously this is your baby, but I just put it out there.
Well, it was my initial idea, but it's not my baby. I'm going to see it through, but it's everybody's baby if they want. And I do believe that if we have an initial get together, maybe in an evening, and if she would come on board or listen in, you know, people will say, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't we do X, Y, or Z? I do know that youngish used to do walks, but as I said to Lawrence originally when I first mooted the idea, that we are a slightly different grouping. And so, you know, I think we should keep that idea going, because you do feel slightly apart, you know, when you don't have anybody in the same house that you can even argue with. So, you know, perhaps initially we should keep it we should start with an evening meeting where everybody will express what they think is worth doing.
Lawrence, there was a problem with walks, wasn't there? Is it allowed?
At the moment, no, it's not allowed. I think you can go for a walk with somebody from outside your bubble. We did during the first lockdown when it was permissible to go with 6 people, and we did put on a youngish walk, but unfortunately the heavens opened and it rained very heavily. I think Sherry, were you part of the? I can't remember. Yes, that's right. There were 3 of us who walked. It was very pleasant, actually. It was. There could have been 303. It was still a very pleasant walk. Yeah, it's a great idea, and as soon as we can do it, youngish or friendship or whoever, that personal contact is imperative. It's really important, and we mustn't forget that the shul has a lot of activities going on the whole time. Even through the last lockdown, it was almost a question of deciding what not to log into, because there was so much. But this is a wonderful initiative. It's a very much needed initiative, and yeah, I'm sure it's going to have the support of everyone here and those people who aren't here, and certainly Gillian and Tom and myself, and everyone associated with Youngish and the rabbinic team. There's only a positive feeling for this, and yeah, let's move forward. You can only move forward and try things out, but yeah, walking as soon as we can. Yeah, and I'll be there, even to friendship, youngish or anything. I'll be there for a walk, definitely.
Any-ish.
Any-ish, yeah.
Sandra, Marcel was just saying, she's just left, but she was just saying it's possible to buddy up people, because I think you're only allowed one person with outside walking, but maybe not everybody has to do everything on every occasion. Somebody can buddy up with somebody and meet on Tuesdays at whatever. Yep. So it doesn't have to be all encompassing, with everybody included.
Yeah. I think somebody's trying to indicate.
Patty.
Yes. Hi. I think it's a great idea for single people. Like when I joined shul, I was a single woman. These things really, even though it's if you're single, you can be the single. And when you come single,
yeah, it's her system.
You not hear me?
No, you're breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I've got our internet's not very good. So I was saying, when I first joined, it was quite difficult to see other single people, and I think that's one of the things that and around here as well. I think
we're losing you, Patty. I'm afraid we're losing you.
She turns her camera off.
My son's just said, Patty, if you turn your camera off, it might come through better. And he understands these things because he works in television. Okay, try now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, I was just saying that. I mean,
I think it's your connection.
Yeah. Sorry, Patty, we're not getting you. Maybe you could write something to us. But it's an interesting thought, actually, that Kiddush is a bit daunting. We might have a singles corner.
Well, somebody once said they didn't like the idea of a singles corner, but on the other hand, I would have found it a safe place to walk, to walk towards that corner, as opposed to thinking, oh my God, there's a sea of faces, and I don't know which way I belong, where I belong now. You see, because it's the change from what was to what is now.
Yep. interesting to hear you so positive about it, though, nevertheless.
Well, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. I think we've got a few more minutes. If we've got any last questions or thoughts, I'd be very happy to take them.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. It was very interesting.
My pleasure, Amber.
Thank you very much, Sandra. That was very interesting. I just want to add that you feel on your own going into the shul kiddush is very interesting. I think I feel, all right, I won't say any woman, I was going to say that, but if I've been to shul on my own, and the last 9 months I have been on my own quite a lot, and of course we haven't been going to shul in the last nine months, but it's just as daunting whether you've got a partner or not, quite frankly.
Right.
Walk into shul, the kiddush, there are hundreds of people, as you say, milling around. We've got the vodka table, which sometimes I head, because you know some friendly person's going to say, yeah, have a vodka. But you also have to do the room in order to see if there's one person that you know, and you might have to go up to them. So it's not just being in your single status as a widow. It's anybody, I think. It is quite daunting doing that. And I have been on a Shabbos and only seen 1 or 2 people I know. They seem to be engaged in conversation. I haven't wanted to go and interrupt them, so I've kind of sidled out. So you're not alone in this. Because you're alone, you're not alone in it. I think it's one of the problems that everybody probably feels when they wander in on their own. And it always looks like the men are made very welcome very quickly.
Absolutely.
Stand on their own. And I've noticed so often.
Yeah.
So, you know, just to let you know that you've got company in that.
Thank you, Marilyn. I mean, it's so true. The men have a camaraderie, and it starts during the service and it continues. And I have to say, it was different when Brian was alive. There was the camaraderie, and suddenly there isn't anymore. That's nobody's fault, but it's a fact. So maybe a singles corner might be an idea, but for anybody who's walking in on their own, maybe I don't have I haven't really thought about that before, but maybe just acknowledging that we singles, and even like yourself, you're there on your own, just acknowledging the fact that we feel on our own, it might help change things a bit. But I think one has to spread the word, maybe, to others who aren't online. Yeah, I think that there's many people who possibly, and who are not online now, might sort of help us and benefit.
I actually have started a welcoming group when people come into shul. I don't know if you can remember, it was so long ago we came into shul, but I did actually have a group of people coming in, and I do try to notice who is alone when they come in, and then find them in the kiddush afterwards. So I have made some attempt to do it, but we must do more indeed. Yeah. I'd like to thank you, Sandra, for a fascinating morning. It's been very interesting, and I think that friendship is going to be a big success. I hope people write to Tamara in the first instance, and we'll let you know if the 19th of November actually works at 8 o'clock in the evening for your first Zoom meeting. We'll be there to support you. All the very best to everyone. Have a great Sunday.